welcome to the Fairly Relatable Podcast.
It's like therapy with your best friends, minus the copay. Welcome back. And today on the podcast, we have Jenna Hermans, who I'm thrilled to have here. Jenna is living proof that you can create a life of calm within chaos and overwhelm. Jenna is the co-founder and COO of Be Courageous, a transformation agency, a busy mom of four, a coach, an award-winning author. She's seen in Forbes, Elle, Business Insider, and more. Jenna helps people and businesses implement tools that put organization and systems around their busy lives that infuse calm and more joy, helping them go from chaos to calm, which doubles as the title of her Benjamin Franklin award-winning book that launched in May of 2023. Jenna, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat today.
We're excited too. So we sent you a questionnaire before this episode and asked you some questions and things we can talk about, and we got it back, and we just thought there's so much here to cover that we've decided that we can't do it all in one episode. So we're going to have you back. So today we were hoping we could just talk about boundaries with you. Boundaries.
Such a good topic.
It's such a big, loaded topic, and we just want to dive in with you and pick your brain on what boundaries mean. So can we start off with just to you, what is a boundary?
Yeah. So boundaries are in my, there's so many definitions of boundaries, right? And it depends on the context that we're talking about boundaries as a, in what realm are we referring to? And one of the many definitions of how I see of boundaries to be is what keeps me safe. Right. Yep, boundaries are what keep me safe, right? And that is as an emotional boundary, as a physical boundary, right? In relationships with myself, understanding what boundaries are as the definition of what keeps me safe, then can relate in so many different arenas as well.
Yeah, that's a great definition. And like you said, there's so many definitions depending on what book you're reading or what theorist you're reading or in what domain. I like that one. It's sort of just, it's to the point. Like it's what keeps me safe. It's those like little parameters that we put in place.
And it's true that there's so many different areas, right? Emotionally, physically, mentally, all these different areas we need to protect ourselves and feel okay with where we are, and then learn to put up those boundaries. But putting up a boundary is a skill, and it's a hard skill to learn, and an even harder skill, I think, to implement. You really have to be willing to do something uncomfortable and not know how the reaction of others is going to be. I wonder, like, for you, well, first of all, how do you know a boundary needs to be put in place? What's happening? I know for me, it's more of a feeling that I get where it doesn't feel right. Something's not okay, even though I keep trying or going or doing. It just doesn't feel safe. Yeah. But for you, when do you realize, or for you, when do you guys realize there needs to be a boundary here?
Yeah. Sometimes it's very similar of like something doesn't feel right. I need to explore that a little bit and understand what's the not right feeling, and then put up, the boundary that needs to be put in order for me to feel like, okay, I'm good. Another thing that is a flag for me is if I'm feeling really tired, right? Like soul tired. Right. Like I am exhausting myself. I'm giving, not enough putting in. Okay. What's going on that I need to put that boundary there so that I can refill my cup appropriately, right? That I can fill me so I'm not running on empty.
That's a great indicator. Yeah. Feeling tired, feeling burnout. For me, it's when by not having the boundary, if it's to my detriment in some way, like, but that's more textbook soundy. Yours is it's like real and practical and tangible almost. It's like, yeah, if I'm feeling tired, it's like that's to my physical, emotional detriment. If I'm sitting and spiraling about how am I going to make all this work? Like I have 17 things I need to do in this one week and I'm just like paralyzed with anxiety. That's to my emotional detriment. It's like, ooh, I need a boundary. Like I need to shave off some stuff here. I need to tell people no, essentially.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I have the same will come up with like resentment. If I start feeling resentful towards somebody or situation,
Wow, you're nailing this.
Yes.
I need a boundary.
Resentment. Yeah.
Which that's interesting because as we know with like when we're people pleasing, we lack boundaries. And one of the ramifications of people pleasing is resentment. It's like we do something for someone and they don't. Oh, I thought you were looking at me.
Oh no.
I mean, like you are looking at like, yeah, Kara. It's like if somebody wants me to do something and I just completely lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I won't look at you anymore.
That was intense.
The people pleasing.
People
right?
pleasing.
Like,
yeah. So if I do something for someone that really it's like, there's bending for people and then there's bending over backwards. So if I'm bending over backwards for someone and they don't reciprocate it or show appreciation or gratitude in a way that makes sense to me or that like feels right to me, there's resentment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really easy to give so much of yourself specifically like with family members, whether it's our children or our siblings or our parents. We feel like we need to give and give and give, right? Whether it's a behavior that's been taught over time or our child is going through something and needs more of us. It feels like that drain. And then you can start to build, not so much like, I don't know if I would say I would have resentment towards my children, but it's like a complete depletion of just all energy sources, which is hard because to a lot of other things that we've talked about and we'll talk about more, but then there's so many other aspects of our life where we need that energy. And then it's almost like you start to resent other parts of your life that you need to show up for when you're like, I need to put my energy. We only have so much energy, you guys.
Like a pie chart.
Yeah, it's just, and it's so easy to want to please others in different parts of our life. And then, yeah, that resentment definitely breeds. And then I don't know about you, but if it's someone where I don't feel like I should be resenting them, but it's there, then I struggle with personal guilt or feeling depleted by this person or resenting this person. So I think it's just this ongoing cycle. So that's why I go back to saying, putting in a boundary, you really have to believe in what you're doing, find the strength to do it, and then learn how to do it in a way that's gentle. Right.
Yeah, like
I think and a build on that also I think is about the follow through, right? So you're like, okay, I have the boundary, I've communicated the boundary, or first rather the self-awareness of where do I need the boundary, and then saying, okay, I'm putting up this boundary now, I've communicated that boundary, but then when and if somebody starts to infiltrate, right, to cross or to push it, right, to see, is that really a boundary for you? Right. Let me see if that's
especially
a thing. And family has a really good job, do really well with that.
Yeah, especially if you haven't been doing boundaries before.
Yeah. And if especially when you're dealing with someone who doesn't know what a healthy boundary is, they themselves, typically people who push boundaries, they tend to lack healthy boundaries on their own. So they push ours. And then, it's like we have to come in and reinforce the boundary.
I know for me a couple years ago, I had to put some boundaries up with some certain people, not just because it was more for my own. I needed to kind of wrap myself in a bubble for a little bit of time. And it wasn't that anything specific had happened, but I was like, I need a little bit of time for myself. So I'm going to put some boundaries up. I think when you're the first one in a group of friends or in a family to instill a boundary and people aren't used to that, you're also then kind of viewed as the problem or the bitch because you're doing something that people aren't used to or comfortable with. And if they're not people that have boundaries, they're not going to understand it. Right. So I think for people that are new to boundaries too, you kind of have to be comfortable with this isn't going to be like, oh, you need absolutely. No, that makes so much sense, right?
Mhm.
You have to be ready to have people think of you however they're going to think of you, and maybe not respect the boundary or be mad about the boundary. How do
Mhm.
you suggest to people, especially if they're new, to identifying, oh my gosh, wait, boundaries are a thing. I need to implement them. How do you recommend to people, here's a positive way to implement a boundary?
Yeah. So I would start with mindset, right? I tend to always start with mindset, like let's get the thinking right. And so that you can have conviction, right? Because if you don't have conviction in what you're doing, you won't be able to do the follow through and to enforce the boundary properly.
Yeah.
And know that, okay, let me be strong in my stance and why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can withstand some, or more easily withstand that pushback, right? With the other people's negative emotions or maybe the attacks that come at you from their lack of understanding or lack of empathy and compassion for what your needs are and what your boundaries are set up for.
Right.
Right. And so first having that that self-awareness, that conviction in why you're doing this and what it's in support of, right? For what purpose putting up the boundary and getting really clear. And when you get really, really, really clear that it's in service of you and your mental health and your ability to show up as the best person that you can for all of the things that you need to do for you, because no one can do it for you. No one can put a boundary up for you. No one can floss your teeth for you. No one can do the things that you know that you need to do to take care of you other than yourself. So when you have the clarity, the conviction, and the knowing of like, I need to do this for me because I can't rely on somebody else to do self-care for me and take care of my mental health and my overall well-being. Okay, I can feel solid in my decision and then move forward.
That conviction piece is so huge because we talk about owning the boundary. Because, like you said, if we don't really believe in the boundary and know, like, we don't validate it,
Or believe in
or
ourselves
believe in
for
ourselves,
inputting it.
yeah, like the why,
Yeah.
like that's so important. We can't own it, unless we really understand the why. So I think that's very, very important. The conviction.
Do you think you need to tell the other person the why? Or can you keep that
It depends. I think
to yourself?
I think it's case by case. What do you think?
I think it depends on the circumstance, right? I think it's case by case that sometimes it's really important to share the deep why. And sometimes it can be just a high level why, right? It could be like I'm struggling with my health, so I need to do this, or I'm not sleeping well, so this is a boundary I need to put up to sleep, to get better sleep, right? Or I just, I have a lot of things that are on my mind and I need to focus. Right. So you don't have to always go into the nuance. I think it's good to share a why in circumstances where it's permitted, right? Where it makes sense to, because then also just the concept of role modeling, right? Like by showing up and putting up boundaries, especially with others who are boundaryless and don't understand it, this is a way to help get into their subconscious and their unconscious mind of when sharing the why and doing it gently, right? That it's getting back there. It's planting a seed for them too, right? Whether or not they're willing to call that out and bring that to the forefront of their mind. But you're role modeling to them what a boundary looks like, how to set it, and a healthy way to communicate it.
Yeah. And I will say, when you do that, even if they're upset at the beginning, if this is a person that is worth being in your life, is going to stay in your life, they will adjust to the boundary. They will come around to respect it, but you have to have the conviction and the confidence to stand by it. And then it's kind of like when working with kids, I talk to a lot of parents, and even with my own kids, if we're going to change a child's behavior, it will probably get worse before it gets better and they understand that this is like the
extinction burst.
Yeah. It's like, this is the new expectation. And then everybody kind of adjusts around it. I think, and I don't know, this is just my thought process, but if you're trying to heal in a certain way or grow and evolve in a certain way or change some aspect of your life, if there are circumstances, people, whatever that need a boundary, I think that boundary comes at the forefront of that healing process or of that growing process, because I think it's really hard to heal or grow or do whatever you need to be doing if those boundaries aren't established.
Yeah, think about like weeds. It's like I've heard so many analogies about boundaries, but it's like if there's this beautiful plant and there's these weeds that just infiltrate, they take over.
Yeah.
Like the plant can't grow. It's not going to thrive. So yeah, it's hard you kind of have to have those. It has to come first, I think, the boundaries.
Yeah. Okay, so Jenna, where as a woman, you're a mom of 4, you're running businesses. What part of your life have you found that you're like, oh, here's an area that needs a boundary?
Yeah, my time. My time. I have big boundaries around my time and that are very protected, right? So I have my family time, I have my work time, I have certain times that I'll spend with my friends and who those people are, right? Who are those who get my precious time? It's limited. As you just said, I have all of these things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so the boundaries with who gets my time, who gets my energy is a big one, and how I spend my time and protect my time. Big
And
boundaries in that.
It must differ, right? Month to month with what you need for your soul too. Like maybe one month you're really focused on work, another month really family focus, another month you really need that time with your girlfriends to fill yourself up. So I imagine it's kind of a constant adjustment.
Definitely. I would say it's not even an adjustment because I need the adjustment. It's more of with kids, right? That they're constantly growing and adapting and changing and maturing. And so as their needs change, that's when my changes happen too. So like my weeks are relatively consistent, I would say, actually. I like my consistency. I like my structures. I like my routines. And it's within the routine that I shift things around of where my focus goes. So like in my work blocks, what am I working on? That'll be different day to day, week to week, month to month. But like when the kids were little, I would be with them, in the mornings on the weekends and a lot more. And now every Sunday morning I go out and I have a hike with my best friend. And that's my Sunday morning now, which is different than having needed to have had a weeknight trying to remember how long ago this was. This was pre-pandemic, and my husband was traveling a lot for work, as he still is, same, that I needed one night a week to not clean up after dinner, to not do the evening routine, to not put the kids to bed. I was like, I need one night. And hired a babysitter and got one night a week to just go and do whatever I wanted. Just
that's incredible.
Alone.
Be alone.
Yeah.
I
wanted to just be alone.
And that's what I wanted. I just wanted to be alone. And I would go to the tea temple. There's this tea temple nearby. I'd go to a coffee shop. I'd go to a bar. I would go anywhere I wanted and just be alone there. And it was magical. I'd take a book. I'd take a journal. I would write. I would read. And I did that for maybe a year or two. And that was what I needed for my own sanity.
I think it's so important to acknowledge that you needed to not be on such autopilot that you get lost in your own needs, and then to implement it. Be like, this is what we're going to do. Kara's kids are a little bit younger than mine. Mine are now 10 and 12, and I know yours are more around that age and a little bit older. I have a question for you. I feel like as they're becoming this age, I know when they're little, they need you. It's this, change the diaper, make the food. But like, I have never felt more necessary to be around. Like there's so many questions. I want to know what they're doing, the stuff that they're being exposed to, and the way, going into junior high school, I don't know. I feel like this is one of the I don't know if it's neediest times or
You're very attuned. You're very plugged in right now.
and I feel
Which is a
like
good
I
thing.
want to be around them more, or I need to be around them more than ever before. And it's kind of this new thing. So whatever system I had for I can be with the kids and I can be at work and I can do this, it's kind of getting shifted because all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I need to know what's going on in their lives, and they don't just readily give it to you anymore. Right? Did you notice that you had to kind of readjust everything as they grew?
Oh, 100%. I'm like, you are hitting it so on the nose right now. And I'm like, good. Yes. I'm so glad. Cause what's running through my mind is when they're little, right? That they're learning attachment. They're learning security, right? They're learning that they can trust you and this world and that you've got their back and that they're good, right? That's the hope, at least.
Yeah.
That's the hope. It's like, all right, we're good. And you don't need to know like all you want to make sure that they're safe and that, they're eating and that they're sleeping, and you have to do all the like life things, right?
Yeah.
Making sure that they're living and, brushing their teeth and taking baths and all that.
Still,
and they get a little
brushing
older.
teeth is a thing again.
Yeah. I mean, I wipe my 7-year-old's butt every single day, but I also have 3 teenagers. I don't have to wipe their butts.
Right.
That's great.
That's good.
I love that I don't need to wipe their butts.
I
mean, but the needs of attentiveness have changed so much over the years. And I have found that my presence is needed in these like the preteen teenage years. The presence was needed that much more. I needed to be present.
That is
really
exactly it.
Yeah.
It's exactly it. My daughter, like just a few weeks ago, we were going like the personality, her attitude, and I'm like, what is going on? And then we went away and we spent a week with them, and she came home and she goes, I am just so happy that I get so much more mommy time right now. And everything changed. She's sweet. However, she talks a lot about me working now, and I think she sees other moms that don't work, and it's become a thing. But now that I'm trying to be around a little bit more, she's like white on rice, to where I'm like, I want a boundary.
Might need a boundary.
Because she's so attached when I'm around, but it's just like this new phase that she's going through where she constantly wants my presence.
She wants mom.
Yeah.
It's really sweet.
It is.
It's really sweet. And a boundary is needed there too. You need to have your
But
space.
I also feel like, yes, and I can implement that, but I also feel like there's something going on in her little body and mind right now where a couple years ago, she was a little bit more, there was a babysitter in the afternoons. We had someone help us in the afternoons and it was fine. And now I just feel like I need to be here in the afternoons with them. I don't know. I think it's my presence. They are requiring and wanting more of that than before. My mom always.
And what I've noticed as they get even older and into like the teenage years, that just physically being present is how I have closeness with my teenagers, because they're not, if they want to talk, they're not necessarily going to go and find me somewhere and call me and say, hey, I just want to chat, or I want to talk about stuff. But if I'm physically here, and they see me as they're walking, from their room to the bathroom, to the kitchen, to the, wherever, they start saying things.
It has to be like in the moment. Right. Yeah.
Right.
If they're ready to talk, you have to be ready to listen, because they're not going to be like, with the littles. I know with my 7-year-old, if he goes, I want to tell you something, I'm like, okay, tell me in like a few minutes. I'm in the middle of something right now, like hold it in your hand and I'll be with you in a couple minutes, go play. And then you'll tell me later. With the teenagers, when they're ready to talk, I'm like, what's up?
There's like this little window.
Yeah. Because it just comes and then that's it. They're not in the mood or the mindset anymore. Absolutely. I want to make sure we have enough. I don't want to take up all your time, but some of the stuff that you wrote, I really want to talk to you about, because I think it's really prevalent for a lot of our friends and just women our age. And it's the adult friendships, feeling like you belong, but not feeling like you belong. I think you're definitely meeting different women, meeting people through sports or schools or whatever, but that sense of like, do I fit in? Do I belong? You wrote about that, and I want to hear more about your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I think, I talked to my teenagers and about this, right? And I've talked about it when they were a little younger and now, and it's the difference between fitting in and belonging and the importance of knowing that difference and how it makes you feel and how you know that you can tell when you belong versus when you're just fitting in. Because on a psychological level and on a developmental level, kids in in middle school, high school, they want to fit in, right? They want to all buy the same shoes and have the same brands and the backpacks and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, look, because now I'm included, right? Like
I'm not different.
I'm not different. They don't, it's hard on their minds and on their bodies as they're trying to establish their sense of self, that if they're separate from the pack, right? If we're in the caveman days and you're separate from the pack and you're an outsider, you're going to get eaten by a lion because you don't have your pack to protect you.
Right.
And so it's as they're going through their development, they're like, I need to fit in. I need to be a part of this pack. But truly, when we're really thinking, because we're not cavemen and we're not worried about dying, by a wild beast animal eating us because we're not with our pack. Because this happened, actually, I'm sure my daughter would be okay with us talking about this. She started freshman year at with this group, right? It was like they have their friend group. And I'd always ask them, like, who's your like really good friend? Like who do you talk to? Something happens, you call them. And she was like, I don't know, like, I would just tell them all at lunch or whatever. And I'm like, who's your person? You got to have your person because the thing with the fitting in is great. You're there, you have people, you can be a part of something. But if you're gone, they don't miss you because you're not, the uniqueness of who you are isn't what's appreciated when you're just fitting in.
That's so true.
And the difference between the fitting in and belonging is that you are appreciated and loved for it being exactly who you are, not just because you match.
You check all the boxes. Yeah.
But I think that also requires kids of that age to know who they are. Instead of just being like, well, this is who I'm supposed to be. I know I've always told my kids, and maybe you might have a way better way to say it, but when little things go on, I'm like, do you feel good being there? If it doesn't feel good, find somewhere or someone where you feel good.
Yeah.
It needs to feel good to be the right person to be spending your time with.
Yeah. And I think we spend so much time trying to be picked and chosen and approved of by others that we kind of forget. Kids too, teens, they forget to do the choosing. Like,
totally.
This group actually doesn't.
Well, and it's hard too when you've been friends with someone maybe for so many years, and then all of a sudden you're growing at different rates, emotionally or mentally. And then all of a sudden this friend that you've always has been your person maybe isn't, and maybe will be again. But just being able to trust yourself, and not even for children, like learn how to navigate that. Right?
Absolutely. So I mean, the tailor end of what ended up happening with that friend group was that she and this other gal in the group, they got ousted from the friend group. And the two of them they really connected. And I mean, have been best friends for now like 2 years, but they don't have their friend group anymore. And I'm like, thank goodness.
Well, I was going to say that probably is a big relief.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was. And I sat with them. There was one night I sat with them and talked to them about fitting in versus belonging. And I'm like, what you guys have is genuine and deep. And that's more important than being like, I have, look, all these friends, but I'm not close with any of them. They don't actually know me. And I don't feel safe to be myself. Because if I am myself, they might judge me negatively for it and be like, oh, well, you're not cool because you've got quirks.
Right.
Versus being like, I love your quirks. Your quirks are awesome. And that's why I want to hang out with you and being celebrated for the uniqueness that you are.
Yeah. I think this transfers into adulthood too, though.
100%. Yeah, because we're like you were saying,
Yep.
we're meeting new people.
We're meeting new people,
Mhm.
but they're not necessarily, it's just so different, right? Because you're meeting all these new people, and I think chemistry, it's just a thing. Like you vibe with someone or you don't. But even if you're like, you don't vibe with this person, your kid's on the same sports
Mhm.
team or you're whatever. And you're like, but I need to figure this out because my child and their child. And then sometimes
Mhm.
I think adults, or at least a lot of the women I talk to, are just like, I don't know why I can't make it work or I don't fit in, but it's such an inorganic way now that
Mhm.
we're all being introduced
Yeah.
to other women and then kind of being like, well, where do I feel safe with these new people? Because, like, for me, for sure, because we have a friend group, there's 5 of us from high school. So we're like, at some point, we're like, we're cool, like, we're good. Like, to find time for 4 other women all the time is like hard enough. But then you also
Mhm.
want to feel like you fit in and can expand yourself out to new people that get brought into your life. So I think, I don't
Mhm.
know, from women we've talked to, it's kind of a thing now as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think there's different types of friendships too. So there's obviously like the really close core groups that you might have. And then there might be more acquaintance types where the kids get along, but maybe you don't necessarily do stuff one-on-one with. Like there's so many different types of relationships and friendships too. Part of it is just like kind of calibrating it,
Yeah.
putting
I
it in.
so love that you brought that up because I actually have a whole portion. There's a portion in my book that's all about the different types of friendships and
Ooh.
relationships.
Yeah.
And one is about like transactional relationships are not bad. They're
Right.
not
Right.
bad relationships. It's if you
Right.
take advantage, like there people
Yep.
associate, a relationship where, let's say, like you just mentioned, right? You're like, our kids are friends. We're not necessarily good buddies.
Right.
But what's great is I know I can call and say, hey, can you pick up my kid from school? Can they hang out with you for a few hours? I have something that I need to do that I can't move or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, sure thing. And they can do the same. We can
Right.
lean on each other for
Right.
support in those ways for what is needed, but we don't have to go around being like, oh, well, I know your whole life story and what's going on at home and all
Right.
the things. No, we don't need to go deep, but we can still be in each other's worlds in this way.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um,
Good stuff.
I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add about
Or
boundaries
your book.
or your book? Or you mentioned the chapter on friendships.
Mm-hmm.
For moms, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your book? Because there is so much in there for women to
Mhm.
implement into their daily lives.
Yeah. So I guess high level, there's 5 pillars, main concepts in the book. And the first one's about efficiency, because the book is all about being a busy person, right? A busy mother specifically is the book, but it's all around being a busy person and how do you create that calm when you've got so much going on, right? There's so
Yeah.
much overwhelm by just all of the things that you have going on in your life. And so efficiency being the first one, right? It's the things that you have to do, but doing them in a way that takes up less time, less energy, right? That you can take care of it so you can make more space for what you want to do, not just what you have to do.
Yeah.
And then the second concept is around habits, right? To make things habitual for you so that you're not putting forth, again, so much effort and energy into doing certain things, right?
Right.
If you can make it instinctual and habitual, it makes it a lot easier to follow through on things that you want to be doing.
Like
But
habit stacking.
yeah, there's habit stacking, there's building rituals and routines, the pre and post, there's cues, rewards. I mean, there's so much science behind all of it. I break
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
down very easily, very clearly. It makes it very easy to understand how to create a habit and then also to understand how to get rid of, right? Bad
Mhm.
habits that don't support you as well. Because calling those things out, like doom scrolling at night, going on the phone, I used to do that,
Right.
right? I'd be on the phone and just scroll, scroll, scroll. And I'm like, this isn't helping me at
Right.
all.
Yeah, I
And
should really
anyway,
break that
totally
I
habit.
just thought that last night.
right.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
we crave that mindless moment,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Tune out.
But
finding
there
a
are other
different right.
ways.
It's
There
finding
are
another
other
way to get
ways.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So and a lot of times with habits, when you're trying to break a bad habit, it's replacing it with something that's better, right?
Right.
Versus just getting rid of it altogether. It's very hard to do. And then the third is communication. How do you communicate with those around you to get the support that you need? And there's a big part of the book that's about boundaries. That is all around communicating and understanding your own boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that we're talking about that today, because it is so important for our own sense of self, for our own stability, to have boundaries around and to communicate them in a way that's gentle.
Yeah. And you mentioned kind of modeling it too, because if our children can grow up learning how to implement boundaries, and then boundaries are a good idea and to set them, I mean, huge
Major.
for them to go through life like that.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yep. And what's great is the role modeling doesn't stop it with our children. It's role modeling and giving permission to anyone we interact with to do the same, right? At the workplace, right? If you start putting up boundaries and say, you know what, like I've had to do this myself. And I said, like, from 1 to 2, right? I don't take meetings. I'm not going to take meetings during that hour. That's an hour in which I'm going to do some rich thinking, working, whatever it is. Boundaries. This is what I need for me, so I can show up and do the best that I can and be the best me. You hired me for a reason. I'm going to show up and do my best. So here's my boundary so that I can do that for you. Right. And then next thing I knew, my colleague was doing the same thing. They're like, because otherwise, I mean, the culture was very much like meeting sparsely all throughout the days and all throughout the weeks. It was like there was no concentrated time to be able to get what you needed done, because you were constantly interrupted. As soon as I would get in flow, right? I'd get in flow and then I'd be interrupted. You have a meeting, you have a thing, you have to answer the Slack right away or whatever it was. And so, at work, and then seeing, oh, other people are starting to do that too. And then productivity is up overall, and happiness and contentment at work is up. Like everything increases positively when you can have that boundary for yourself. When
it makes sense.
And
I'm
the why.
thinking of all the new boundaries I need to set.
I know. Same. My mental list of boundaries.
But are you going to have the time to actually write it down and remember it?
No, I'm not. This is good stuff. I mean, and I think certainly we got to have you back on, because there's a lot we didn't get to that we'd love to get to at some point. But your book sounds incredible, and I think it's right where so much of us are at. Like, we need that stuff, we need it broken down in a way that's not dense, or like it's like, oh, now I gotta go read my.
It's like another to do.
Yeah, it's like another to do. So it's your book sounds awesome.
Tell us really quickly the last 2 pillars.
The last 2 are community, and that's where friendships is a part of that, right?
Yeah.
Within the community chapter, and the last chapter is about self-care. It's about sustainable, systemic self-care.
Where can people find your book? Anywhere?
You can find it anywhere. Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. If they don't have it out of stock, ask them. They'll get it for you. It's distributed all over the world and all the places.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about. You actually just said something, and I have to bring it back to my memory, but I feel like that's a whole other conversation to have too. So thank you for coming on right now. I just love your calm presence as well.
Yes.
So you're clearly someone who practices what you talk about. And this is great for us. It's great for women everywhere. And we appreciate you coming on, and we can't wait till next time.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
And to find Jenna will be in our show notes. So anyone that wants to follow along, she will be there. All right. Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, guys, here's the deal. If you like what you hear,
and we know you do,
be sure to like, subscribe,
and write us a review.
That rhymes.